next session is a product panel on Desi Chickpeas, sponsored by ACE Group. It's moderated by Peter Wilson, Australia Milling Group. May I please request Peter Wilson to grace the dais? Moderator for this session. Panelists include Kulbhushan Goyal of Sharp Corporation Limited, Muhammad Ahmed of Awam Group, Nick Putney of GrainCo Australia, Jayesh Patel of ETG Singapore, and Mostyn Gregg from Glencoe Grain Australia. Very quickly, brief introductions on our panelists. Muhammad Ahmed, director of the family-owned Awam Group business, which has been in grains for about the last 40 years, is a leading importer, exporter, and indenting house, and owns manufacturing units in pulses, rice, oil, and oilseed in Pakistan. He is also on the executive committee of the international pulses body, CICILS IPTAC. Nick Putney has recently moved to Australia after almost a decade in Geneva, where he was at AWB and most recently with Viterra. And he's now heads GrainCo's storage and logistics business, which serves over 10,000 Australian grain growers through a network of 280 country silos connecting Australia's growers and domestic and international consumers via 7 ports that last year exported over 8 million tons of Australian grain. He is the regional manager, Middle East, Africa, and Japan, GrainCo Limited, Australia. Jayesh Patel plays an advisory role at ETG and plays key function in all management issues. He also monitors day-to-day department performance against established goals and parameters. Mostyn Gregg, with a background in risk management and treasury operations, he now looks after trading at Glencoe, responsible for pulses trading all across the world. Mr. Kulbhushan Goyal is not with us at the moment. I'm not sure if he'll step forward, but it's a pleasure to briefly introduce you to our moderator, Peter Wilson, who's Director Northern States, Australia Milling Group. It's a wholly owned Canadian-based TSX-listed alliance grain trader, and prior to joining Australian Milling Group, Mr. Wilson held a range of senior management and trading positions both in Australia and Canada. He's, of course, trained in the business with a postgraduate qualification in agribusiness from Monash University, and, of course, also has a great interest in his family farming business in Darling Downs, southern Queensland. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter Wilson, Director, Northern States, Australian Milling Group, to moderate this discussion, Desi Chickpeas.
Morning, everybody. I think what they should have done in this particular hall is to have the multicolored seats like you do in a sports stadium. So even when there's not many people watching the game, it actually looks like, well, at least it's more colourful. But look, we want to try and be fairly active today. We'd like it to be as interactive as possible, and I thank you all for coming. Now, Pravin Dongre was going to, because we've lost our man from India. Is Pravin actually in the audience? We just exposed Pravin as dodging the session. So if he does walk in, if someone sees him, just tell him to roll up, and we may just ask for some commentary from the floor on the Indian situation. So I want to thank my panellists today. We're going to, we've got some very experienced people here, and of course the Desi chickpea market in the 20 years that I've been, I guess, playing in this business has become much more sophisticated. The Kabuli industry continues to roll along at about 10% of total production, but really the substantial growth we've seen in global trade has been around the Desi chickpea as part of the yellow pulse S&D, which joins yellow peas and dun peas. So I'm very pleased to see that we have seen a great deal of sophistication, and unlike the earlier slides which my colleague showed about the exposure, and I call it exposure, that the likes of faba beans has in terms of export destinations, over the last 20 years we have seen a broadening and deepening of global demand for Desi type chickpeas, as it has occurred for yellow peas as well. And that's a great thing, because we cannot build confidence in a crop on a sustainable basis without depth of demand. And so I'm pleased to say that many of the gentlemen here and of course many of you have contributed over a couple of decades in developing these markets. So I've got a very short presentation to sort of run through just to do a bit of scene setting, and then we really want to talk about what's happening in the market from a supply side. We'll talk about the issues surrounding sowing. Everybody's looking heavenwards in Australia, so we'll get a bit of an update. And people are talking about what's going to happen in Pakistan with a very large crop, and hopefully Pravin rolls in and we'll get to talk about India. Otherwise we'll make something up that at least sounds interesting. So if we look at the sort of numbers, the top 5 producing chickpea nations of the world, India obviously sits up the top. I was talking to my colleague from Australia, Owen Goddard. He says, how big do you reckon the Indian crop is? And I said, oh, it could be 7 or 8 million tonnes. And he reckons, I disagree with you. And I said, and that's a fair point, because I don't think anyone really has a clue as just how big the Indian chickpea crop actually is. And it reminds me of a story when I first started travelling, having been classically trained by some very, very sharp traders in the Australian Wheat Board. I was looking to get hard data. You know, where do I get the hard data on production in the subcontinent? And this very wise gentleman, I think we were actually in Pakistan at the time, sat me down and said, well, let me tell you, son, the way this works, I'm obviously not using a Pakistani accent because I can't carry it off well enough, but he said, let me tell you, many years ago, the Pakistan Ministry of Finance wanted to establish how many cattle were in Pakistan. And it was a fair question, how many cattle are in Pakistan? So they ruminated, as you would if you're talking about cattle, ruminated for quite some time as to how to come up with a strategy to establish how many cattle in Pakistan. And one bright spark said, I know what we'll do. We'll go to India and we'll find out how many cattle are in India and we'll divide it by 5. And so off they went to Delhi. They spoke to some high-ranking officials, and somehow they established the number. They divided by 5, and they reported back to the Minister of Finance in Pakistan, this is how many cattle are in Pakistan. He said, well, how did you work that out? And he said, this is how he did it. And it's fantastic. Well, how did you validate that? And they said, well, we got the numbers. That sounds right. We need to check it out. So ring the guy you spoke to in Delhi. How did he work out his numbers? He said, oh, we didn't really talk about that, but what we did is we sent a team to Islamabad last year. We worked out how many cattle were in Pakistan and we multiplied it by 5. Ladies and gentlemen, that is central to the issues surrounding some of the production figures, particularly out of the subcontinent, because of the cropping systems and the subsistent nature of those cropping systems. But obviously India is the big game in town. Desi chickpeas in Australia have really come to the fore. And I do want to talk a little bit about how we've got to where we are. And it has a lot to do with an organisation that I'm currently chairman of, and that's Pulse Australia. But prior to my being chair, we had a situation in Northern Australia where Desi chickpeas, and my colleague Russell Greening spoke earlier about disease pressures on faba beans. Desi chickpeas suffered a tremendous rout in 1998 in southern Australia with a disease called ascochyta. And it pretty well took that chickpea crop in southern Australia down to really, really low levels because the confidence was sapped from the farmers. And if the farmers aren't confident that they know how to manage their production risk, they will not grow a crop. Quite secondary to marketing risk, but production risk is very, very high. In 2010, we actually had a not dissimilar situation in Northern Australia, which was the industry had recovered over many years of drought to having quite substantial production potential. And we had a major event, outbreak of botrytis grey mould and ascochyta rabii, which is obviously quite devastating to production outcomes, or had the potential to be quite devastating. Now, you're new, the CICILS Chief Executive Officer, my colleague Gavin Gibson, who's actually standing up. He's, give everybody a wave, Gav. I told you I'd embarrass you. But Gavin was the Chief Executive Officer of Pulse Australia, and of course Tim Edgecombe followed Gavin. But Gavin and his team in the field sought about to provide confidence to agronomists and subsequently farmers that this disease could be managed. So there was a system to respond to devastating agronomic potential for agronomic loss. And through that period, the confidence that was restated through the agronomic chain, it was really activism in terms of extension to farmers, meant that the following couple of years we have now seen record production of Desi chickpeas in Australia. So that confidence is really starting to push through the broader Australian pulse industry. But I can tell you, we would not have had a 700,000 tonne crop in Australia last year had it not been for the intervention and the activism of the many people surrounding the outbreak of disease in 2010. We have to be prepared to look long term. And of course now, and we'll talk a little bit about the impact that the futures market is having to try and give some confidence in terms of price discovery mechanisms and what that will do in terms of production and activism with regards to trade. Pakistan this year, quite a substantial crop, and Ahmed will talk about that, and we'll all be very interested to know whether we think exports might actually come out of Pakistan. Turkey and Mexico, obviously for the Kabulis. Kabulis make up about 10% of the entire chickpea crop, and but trade very, very differently. Very small amount of the Kabulis make it into what we call the industrial market, or the Desi chickpea, compete with Desi chickpeas. One thing I do a lot of is do a bit of charting of price, and I've said for a long time that the price, there is a relationship between Desis and yellow peas. They're part of what I call the yellow pulse, or the industrial yellow pulse mix. And what these graphs have been telling me over the last couple of years is the world can handle a greater volume of Desi chickpeas. The price is telling us that we can actually confidently produce more Desi chickpeas in Australia. And we also have emerging markets. And Jayesh is going to talk us a little bit about those emerging markets in East Africa and the sort of dynamics that are starting to come in there. And of course, that's great news for those countries which need hard currency. So the world, through price, is telling us we can handle more Desis. I think it's also telling us that they want us to continue to produce yellow and dun peas, and that's great news for places like Canada and Australia. I mean, there's no real prizes for guessing the top destinations for chickpeas. India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Middle East, they're really your key destinations for all of the pulses or chickpeas that are grown around the world. And India is the big game in town, no question. So, and we'll talk a little bit about just how many chickpeas have headed to India. Moving on to some of the issues, and I guess now I want to hand it over to some of the panellists to talk about some of the issues, and I think we'll just leave it fairly open. But I think we want to talk about the sowing conditions, or indeed the recent harvest conditions, as it case may be. We want to look at price forecasts. Last year when Sanjeev was up here, I think he actually got an auction going. I don't know whether Sanjeev is here. Put your hand up, Sanjeev, you there? So Sanjeev is probably going to start an auction later, and I don't know how many tonnes he'll put on the block, but I'm prepared to conduct an auction if Sanjeev's prepared to participate. We talk about market structure. The benefits of the futures that support Desis. Desi chickpeas are the only pulse today that do have what you'd say a globally accessible futures market, which I think is an interesting development in recent times. Forward contracts. Many of us in Australia view a forward contract into some of these destination markets as a free call, and I'm suggesting that they're no longer going to be free anymore. So we can talk about the structure of the market whereby, as a seller, if you sell something and the market falls 40 or 50 bucks, the buyer puts his hand up and says, I'm sorry, we can't perform. And that's not going to instill confidence to continue to grow this industry. We do have some emerging suppliers and growth from key destinations in East Africa, and we'll have a bit of a discussion about what's happening on whether the market's becoming more demanding for quality. I believe it is, and there's no question we are shipping a better quality than we ever have before. Our farmers are getting better at producing better quality. They're managing their pests, they're managing their diseases. And if I think back 20 years and the sorts of faba beans and chickpeas and peas that would come across weighbridges in right throughout Australia in that period, quite frankly, it was rubbish. Today we are producing, I think, exceptional quality with really very well managed extension tasks being carried out by organisations like Pulse Australia and through the agronomy, some of the agronomy courses, etc. And we're always looking for value-added opportunities, so the panellists I'd like you to comment on where you see opportunities for the value-add. I might start with, of course, the greatest state in the greatest country of the world, and that's Queensland. Nick's going to talk about the sowing conditions and what we might expect in Queensland, and then he can touch on the other issues and any other issues he sees fit, and then we'll do Southern Australia, New South Wales, and the balance of the country in terms of their outlook, and roll into some of the others. So without any further ado, Nick.
Look, I've been invited this morning to talk a little bit with, we've got a few Australians up here today, so we decided to separate that responsibility into different zones in Australia, of which I'll just have a few words about Queensland. The program that we've just experienced in Queensland has been exceptional. It's been very successful, and it's now coming to an end in terms of supply. An important aspect about Queensland, probably the most important aspect, is about 4 or 5 years ago, the acreage was around 60 or 70,000 hectares. Today it's more than 200,000 hectares. It's a massive crop, it fits the rotation, more farmers are becoming comfortable with it, and it's definitely a crop here to stay. The growth prospects are now dependent on weather rather than farmer familiarity. And I think that with the weather that we've had in the last couple of months, we've had probably excessive rain, but the soil moisture profile is showing us that with our expectations, we're expecting another 200,000 hectares to be planted, maybe another 2 or 3%, but that's about it under very good conditions. On the basis of that, we're at this stage only working on an average yield of about 1.5. So for Queensland, we could be looking at about 300,000 tonnes. The other interesting point with that, and just to clarify, our company, GrainCorp, are the largest bulk handler in the region. We probably have close to 300 facilities, locations in Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. So we have a lot of people on the ground to assess the conditions and come up with their ideas, independent, which we work closely with Pulse Australia and others to formulate and feed back. But the dynamics with this expanding crop in Queensland have moved a lot of the Queensland crop into a bulk export trade, which didn't exist to the same extent a few years ago. This season we had more than 200,000 tonnes, 220,000, 230,000 tonnes of bulk exports, and there's still a cargo or so to go. So this has been an interesting and important dynamic. Queensland is the first harvest, Queensland is the earliest offtake, and the earliest shipments to be delivered into destinations like India. So from that respect, it's also a very important crop. Just to pick up on one or two of the themes that Peter just mentioned, in terms of quality, the quality is improving because I think we're becoming more aware in Australia of the way that chickpeas need to be handled and are selecting our sites carefully, moving away from auger-driven facilities to belt-driven facilities, to moving the grain around, touching the chickpeas less for risk of breakage or damage. So I think we're becoming more aware of how to manage the quality in Australia. That's improving for sure. The other aspect that was mentioned was regarding a futures or price discovery. Without the price discovery of futures contracts and things, it's very difficult to run pools in Australia for chickpeas and other pulses. So it will still remain a cash-driven industry. We have an overall crop idea in Australia, but I'll just leave that until maybe after Mostyn has said a word or two, so that we can marry the two views of where we're headed to for the new season.
I think it's the tale of two cities with New South Wales. You've got anything west of Narrabri from is dry as a chip, to use the Australian idiom, but I think the real problem we've got here is that there's an expectation, I believe, in the market from India that, considering we did such a great crop last year, the same thing will happen again. And I think that needs to be taken into account. Nick and I had a very frank discussion yesterday about the physical task of actually executing the size of the crop last year, which Grain Corp did a fantastic job in doing, considering the issues we had with the Boggabri derailment and other issues with flooding, etc. in Queensland. So, you know, hat off to Tim. But I guess to go back to the New South Wales expectation, I think at the moment the grower, if they're confident, if they've got a reasonable soil profile, if they're east of that Narrabri-Walgett line, then they're going to put chickpeas in. I think, however, those growers that were successful last year in the less arable area, in the sort of the periphery area, that really gave the ability of that large crop, of that 700k crop we've discussed, they're really going to have a tough time, I think, in executing and growing the same sort of size as last year. So, in line with that, I think, you know, it's just like pulses from India. It's very hard to give an exact size of the crop, especially considering the fact that, you know, it's being seeded in Queensland as we speak. It's going to happen soon in New South Wales. But I think, you know, there are positive numbers from the growers. I think the fact we've seen a recent rally in prices has given some confidence to the grower in a want to plant chickpeas against other cereal crops. But I think that is something we have to be aware of, is that if we don't see a good rainfall, and it's something to look at, I think, very closely, watch the Bureau of Meteorology, you will see a switch away into cereals from pulses. And I guess on the back of that as well is that the grower is reasonably new to pulses and a little bit gun-shy when it comes to a willingness to offload large tonnage, and so it becomes a very difficult market where you're trying to meet the needs of the end buyer and the want of the grower. So I think the futures market has been excellent. I think there is definitely room to improve the clarity of that. There's been discussion of a futures market based in Dubai, which, you know, if we run a CBOT and a Kansas and a buy versus an NCDX, I don't think it's a bad thing. But to give further clarity would be excellent. And I would also like to go back on Peter's comment about the forward contracts as well. It's difficult enough to execute a trade as it is in a volatile and currency-driven market. We've seen the Aussie rally fall so much in the last week and affect pricing. You know, imagine what you see over a 4 or 5 or 6 month period. So, you know, I've had people ask me about new crop, and it becomes difficult if there's a move in market. I know Nick is the same. Do we sell? What do we do? It becomes a difficult process. Moving, I guess, again down to Victoria. Last year was an interesting year. We had one of the largest Kabuli crops grown in Victoria. Fantastic growing season. Good moisture profile. A little bit tight at the finish, so the size wasn't there. And I think those same growers that grew last year will not grow this year because it's dry. The Victorian soil profile is the driest we've seen in the Mallee for 19 years, I believe. There's some fantastic drought predictions on the Bureau of Meteorology again that are well worth reading. One was published on the 4th of April, but I won't wax lyrical about it, but it's definitely worth a read, and you know, maybe a word of warning for those that expect the same sort of numbers we saw last year. But I think as long as we see again, Nick and I had a discussion about this, and Peter and I had a discussion as well. You know, pricing, it's where do you put the market? I think as long as you see a grower that maybe at a 650 to 700 CFR level over this period of time, I think you'll see growers approach that. Anything lower than that, I believe, it won't be as an attractive process for the grower. So it's something to take into account. But I think on the back of that, interesting enough, you know, Australians don't consume it, we try and export it. It'd be interesting to hear what Ahmed says about this exportable surplus that's in Pakistan. I think that's what the market is looking for. It'd be interesting to hear your point on that.
And I think it's a very good point for people who are Australia watchers. And as per my graphs, Australia is a significant supplier and exporter of Desi chickpeas. And we do have some major agronomic gaps in terms of soil moisture. And anybody who knows about growing Desi chickpeas, we do need nice depth of soil moisture. And right now there are some gaps, and these guys have identified it perfectly. It does bear watching over the coming weeks as we move into our sowing zone. Before I put Ahmed in the hot seat with regards to what's happening in Pakistan, I just want to get Sanjeev Dubey up here because we do need someone to talk about India, so I'm going to put him on the spot. I know he's a very capable young lad, so if he comes up while Ahmed is speaking, and he can, as he's walking up here, he can prepare a dissertation on his thoughts on India. But Ahmed, Pakistan, obviously a significant player at the back end of last year. Lots and lots of product went to Pakistan sort of through that you know, July, August, September, October period, and then things sort of went a bit awry with some structural issues, but we haven't seen Pakistan significantly playing, I guess, in the front portion of this year. Tell us about the crop and tell us about where the market is, and do you think the government will allow exports of Pakistani Desis?
Thanks, Peter. As we are talking around, people back at home are harvesting our crop. And as you can see, Pakistan is a very important player, not only because it eats a lot of chickpeas, but it also produces a lot of chickpeas. Last year, we had a crop of, let's say, about 350,000 tons. And this year, we are expecting a crop from 900,000 tons to 1 million ton. So why is there such a difference between both of the crops? The reason is that most of the area where chickpeas is seeded, all those areas, wheat is also being seeded. And wheat has been given good places where there are good irrigation system, whereas chickpeas, wherever there is not enough irrigation system, chickpeas is harvested at those places. So if we get good rains, we get good blessing from God, then we have a good rain. If we don't get good rains, then we have a crop of, let's say, 300 or 400,000 tons. This year, by the blessing of God, we had a very good rain. And as you can see, that we are expecting a very big crop. And 90% chances are that we should end up with a very good crop, good in quality and good in quantity.
So where are we with harvest?
I think it will take another 1 week to 10 days to get it all done. But
so we're well into it, or we're well into the harvest at the moment?
Yeah, as I said, we are talking here. They're harvesting over there. So it's just going around, and it's really going, whatever we have heard, it's really going great. Prices have come down because the crop is really good. So crop is good. On the other side, I would like to speak on if government will allow exports or not. This is a very big question, and finger crossed on it. No one can answer on this. See, we have a surplus crop. If government acts efficiently, they should allow export, because not only it will generate extra surplus foreign exchange for Pakistan, but also it will give a good price to the growers. You see, when the grower actually did seeding, they were getting a price of $850 to $900. They were looking at this price, that's why they did seeding. And today they're getting a price of $400. So they are not happy. They shouldn't be selling at this price, but they don't have money, they have to sell it. So we have a very good, the growers won't be happy if they don't get a good price. Next year you won't see such seedings. So let's hope that government does it. But as you all know, maybe that we have election next year and we don't have any government. There's an interim government right now. I don't think so they can take such a major decision. So maybe when the new government comes, then we can have a better view of government will allow or it won't allow.
When's the election?
The date they have decided is 11th of May, but let's see if it happens on that day or it doesn't.
That's next month.
Yeah, next month. It could delay maybe 15, 20 days. It won't be like that we will have an election after 2 months or 3 months. Yeah. So I mean, the new government comes in, it's settled down, then it will take such a major decision. It's not a small decision, because keeping in mind that chickpeas is the main product for the poor people, so government won't be very aggressive in taking this decision.
So I think, in summary, unlikely to see a major decision on exports from Pakistan for between 4 and 6 months from today.
See, it's Pakistan. It can happen anytime, and you can keep asking them, and it won't happen. So you never know. You never know on that.
But as an export destination for anybody who's supplying Desi chickpeas, looks like Pakistan is at least out until the end of the year.
100%. No, let's say if they don't allow export, maybe we are out of market for next year, because we would have a surplus also. No, not only if, let's say, if we produce a crop of 1 million ton, and if our consumption is 700,000 tons, then we will have a surplus of 300,000. Next year also, if we have a 300 to 400,000, we will be self-sufficient next year also. But
Thanks, Samir.
yeah, but keep in mind one thing, no, that keep in mind one thing, no, that price right now for chickpeas in Pakistan is $400. Yellow peas at the moment is trading at $450, $440. So we will have a definitely very high increase in consumption of Desi chickpeas. I personally feel that our consumption will increase at least by 100,000 tons.
So that we'll see some substitution, and maybe we will not see a major global impact on the surplus of Desis that are in Pakistan right now. So
yeah, I mean, see, we won't be in the buying. That would be a major change. Secondly, there would be something going out via borders. So that
maybe to Iran.
Yeah, that could disturb the market also.
All right. Well, listen, we might take the opportunity to go to Jayesh, and let's talk a little bit about the emerging markets and the role they're playing. We're definitely seeing both Ethiopia and Tanzania join in the fray of selling Desis. Would you like to make some comments on the structure of those emerging markets?
Thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Just to, and Desi chickpeas, Africa does not play any significant role as such, but it is an important for you, at least the people, to know about that in Africa, mainly the Ethiopia and Tanzania, the two countries mainly produces the Desi chickpeas. It is unlikely like the Canada or Australia. Mainly the farming is done by the smallholders, the small growers. The size of the farms varies between 1 and 1.5 acre. The thing that the production was, I will not take much of time, because just looking at the time, I will just try to quickly wrap up on this thing. The production wise, that the Ethiopia produces around, on average, about 300,000 tons of Desi chickpeas, but the export is hardly about 20%, and I think the highest they exported, it was about 2011, is about 75,000 tons. But on an average, that average export is about 30,000 tons. Tanzania produces around 27,000. There is absolutely no domestic requirement. Whatever they produce, they export it, and I think their export is around 20 to 25,000 annually. That's the exporter thing. The reason being also there is not much motivation on our Desi chickpeas, because most of the African countries is still struggling for the staple food requirement. The government and all the NGOs are giving a high priority towards the staple food to meet the basic requirement for the countries, and I think that's where the Desi chickpeas is not falls under any priority. With regards to the market of this one, because of its size and the color, which is quite preferred, it doesn't go for any milling. Mainly it goes for the direct consumption. The main markets are the Middle East, Iran, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. The arrival of the African chickpeas is quite ideal, which comes harvested generally in June and July, which is just ahead of the Ramadan. So basically, whatever is being produced, it meets the requirement of the Ramadan. But Desi chickpeas as such in Africa is a very small crop, and obviously it doesn't influence much. That's all about the African Desi chickpeas.
So potential for growth. I mean, as an Australian, and we currently are I guess we are the big boys in terms of Desi chickpeas. Should we be concerned about these emerging suppliers from a competition perspective? How much growth might we expect out of Eastern Africa?
Peter, as I said to you, that the priorities are different. I don't think so. It is at all concern for you. Last 5 to 7 years, growth has not been there. It is quite steady. Just to understand that why these guys are producing the chickpeas. Basically, it's soil, this nitrogen retaining things is a main concern for them. So it's a cross crop. Basically, the farmers, they consider the thing. And second thing is that the major priority has been given to the staple food like rice and the maize as such. Obviously, the farmer produces first and foremostly for his own requirement, and whatever the additional is being produced, that's where they export the thing. So currently, the government focus or all the NGOs focus is still largely remains on a staple food and not this sort of a special crop.
Wonderful.
So it is not a big concern for Australia as such.
Okay, so I can sleep easily tonight.
Peacefully.
I just have to worry about Pakistan. I've asked Sanjeev to come up and make some comments, general comments about how he sees the Indian and maybe the Bangladeshi market.
Well, Bangladesh is a very steady market, like we all know, probably anywhere between 70 to 100,000 tons in a year, and that's been steady over time, over the past few years. India, I think it's been an average crop, like Peter mentioned right at the beginning, that it's very difficult to pinpoint a number on the Indian crop. But over the past, what has been different over the past few years is the UAE, Dubai market, which has actually come up, and it's become a substantial market, at least for the Australian origin. And this year being different is the Pakistan surplus. Now, whether the Pakistan surplus of 250,000 tons seeps through to Dubai, to the Dubai market through various channels or not, that needs to be seen. And as far as the Australian crop is concerned, we think that, yes, moisture is a concern west of Narrabri, at the Walgett region. Maybe about 200,000 tons could be affected. Like, it won't go to zero, but it definitely will be affected. But I still put a number roughly at maybe about 600,000 tons in Australia. It's too early to say, but it's just for the sake of putting a number. And where those 600,000 tons would go out of Australia would be to India, Bangladesh, and Dubai, and nothing much to Pakistan. So there is a possibility of a carry forward stock in Australia this year as well. And I think that seeing India consuming or importing, close to maybe about 350,000 tons or so last year or this year gone by, I think that it's possible that that number should be around the same.
And I guess anybody can comment here, but you have to say it was an impressive exit from Australia, the substantial tonnages that we lifted between November and the end of February. The Australian supply chain worked quite well, don't you think?
Well, absolutely. It was unprecedented, shipping out 10 bulk vessels out of Australia. So that's really cemented the place for Australian chickpeas into the subcontinent. The possibility of, or the feasibility of having tested out the system out of the east coast of Australia, I think it's been fantastic. 10 bulk vessels never done before. It used to be struggling to do 1 or 2 bulk vessels, mainly because of the demand in the supply region also. But just to get execution done, it's been really, really good.
And of course, very large container programs as well, and that's gone, with the exception of a major derailment that occurred at the end of November. The container traffic has been phenomenal.
Yes. In fact, well, containers has improved over years, and the efficiency of moving out containers has definitely improved.
Briefly, I think one of the things that the futures market does give us as traders, merchandisers, etc., is an ability for liquidity and an understanding of pricing and destination. So it makes me as a trader more willing to be proactive and actively trade it. So I think, as I said, mentioned before, seeing another futures market in Dubai, or further clarity on the Indian and further liquidity in the Indian futures market, I think is only a positive thing. So, moving forward, I would definitely be one to advocate more futures and more liquidity. I think is the key, and transparency. But it's a process. But I think, as we said, Australia's come a long way in a short period of time from a crop. So as Nick mentioned, 60,000 hectares to what we're doing this year in Queensland and potentially New South Wales, it's pretty phenomenal. So I think, moving forward, as we heard from that fantastic speech on the first day, that food security and water availability is essential. So the dryland farming that we have in Australia, I think, is a very important thing. And I think, moving forward, if with a growing population in the subcontinent and an increased demand for that high protein food, Tanzania and Ethiopia coming online is only a positive thing, I think, to give further liquidity in the market and further timing differences. So I'm just interested, when does the Ethiopian crop come off, and what sort of timing? Yeah, so June, July, which fits perfectly with our timing program. If we've got a November, December, January window for our crop, and then it fits quite well. So, any other comments, Nick?
I actually just want to add to the fact that we're approaching the ideal planting window for Australia. So if we don't get substantial rains in New South Wales and Victoria in the next 4 or 5 weeks, we'll be revising the estimates lower quite quickly. Queensland, as I said, is fairly safe, good soil moisture profile, but the other areas will definitely need to be revised down without a good soak. Just one final question for Prayesh. In terms of the quality differential from the consumer market, in terms of the price, in terms of the colour and the size, is it on parity with the Australian values on a CFR level, or?
Thanks, Nick. See, Tanzania chickpeas, especially, it's called as a golden gram, and mainly used for the direct consumption. It doesn't go for the milling. It is quite a preferred variety, especially in the Iranian market, Afghanistan market, Bangladesh market. The way it comes, as I said to you, it comes harvested mainly in June and July, which is well ahead of the Ramadan period, mainly caters the requirement of the Ramadan. So especially the Tanzanian chickpeas as such, it does not influence directly or indirectly with any of the Australian crop, or maybe the Pakistan crop, or maybe the Indian domestic crop as such. The requirement of this is quite different.
I would like to add something. If you see the Tanzanian chickpeas, it's very difficult to split. And that's the reason you see, it's going for direct consumption. And this is the reason why Dubai is in the market. If it was good for splitting, these people sitting in Tanzania, they would be splitting and they would be selling it. Because if you know that 70% of Dubai import is basically for re-export. So, I mean, they can do it from Tanzania.
Sorry, Ahmad, this question is not that the Tanzanian, we do have a milling in Tanzania, and we at least split about the 50% of the crop. Definitely, it's not a desire to split the crop in Tanzania, because we get much more premium when we sell it over the Australia setting. Okay, so the idea is that the whole thing is that this is not a difficult variety to split. It's just that it's a premium variety over any chickpeas available in the region.
Thank you. And gentlemen, I'll just whip around, and we're going to do a bullish bearish for November sailings. Nick, bullish bearish on the market.
I think Australian farm.
One word.
Slightly bearish.
Slightly bearish, ladies and gentlemen.
Fence. Sitting on it.
Those who sit on fences get, all right.
Till new crop, bullish.
Bullish till new crop, and then new crop, I guess we wait and see.
Bearish.
I was very surprised to hear Ahmed say bearish.
I would say bullish.
Bullish, and I'm always a bull. I'm always a bull, ladies and gentlemen. So I think, please take that down. Please, if you wouldn't mind putting your hands together for these gentlemen who've given their time, and thank you very much. Do we have
to Nick Putney of Grainco Australia, Boston Greg, Glencoe Grain, Jayesh Patel, ETG Singapore, and finally Mohammed Ahmed, Awam Group Pakistan. Of course, Sanjeev's got one yesterday, Sanjeev. Thank you for stepping on the panel today. And to Peter Wilson from the organizers. Sure. Sanjeev, do us the honors, please. Thank you.